Yeah. That makes sense. That's why we're here. Is like, what's up, Aaron? Welcome. That's why we're here in terms of figuring out there's so many more possibilities with MCP now. So no guarantees can answer all of them, but we'll get started. We're gonna do two main intros. One, what is MCP and how is it integrated into gumloop? We'll demo it so you can see live. And any spot along the way, feel free to use the chat if you have questions. And just to warm up the chat, feel free to drop in where you're calling in from. I'm based in San Francisco, so we use the chat for live questions, and we're gonna go over what an MCP is, how it's in gumloop, and then discuss different ideas for what's up next. Let's welcome Aaron. We got Aaron from gumloop. We got Aaron, the education community lead, who just published a great podcast actually 2 days ago on MCPs too. We'll share that in the chat after. Welcome Patrice. Feel free just to drop in the chat where you're calling in from. We're gonna use the chat for live feedback and questions. The goal for this is as roundtable and discussion based as possible, not just a one-way broadcast. I'm curious, Patrice, with your video on have you used MCPs before, have you used gumloop before, or new to both?
I am a complete novice at all of this and just curious to participate and learn.
Awesome.
So
Welcome.
I will be observing. Thank you guys.
That sounds good. That's what this is set up for. And so just to get started, like think about if you got a laptop today. So you got like a brand new, not laptop, desktop. Let's say you got a brand new Apple Mac Studio, and you've got a keyboard, a mouse, and maybe extra memory. Imagine if every peripheral came like this, exposed wire. And you're like, what? How am I supposed to use this mouse if it's just an exposed wire? Well, previously, before there were standards in electronics, you'd have to make your own adapters. And it was all over the place. That's not the state in 2025 for hardware. When you get a new laptop or you get a new computer, you've got a really beautiful USB-C adapter that can do everything from memory to peripheral addition. So you buy something, you plug it in, and it just works. That same kind of thing in hardware that's standardized that is what an MCP is, or Model Context Protocol. It's a standardized way for an AI to use a tool. So instead of having to integrate every single tool yourself, it's a plug and play where a large language model can think about what tools, what functions in this tool do I have access to? What tools should I be using? And let's just figure it out. And so in terms of MCP side, you've got the ability to talk to different tools. The way you talk to those tools is you need a host or a client. So right now, the client list is very small. You either have to work in Cursor on the command line or in Claude's desktop app. And in terms of Claude's desktop app, let's actually pull this up right now. I'm on Windows, and Claude does not like me using Windows for desktop app. So if you can see on the right corner over here, I'll reset this guy. We're getting a whole bunch of errors. I was trying to connect different MCPs this week just to show the difference with gumloop versus another client. And on Claude's desktop app, let's refresh this guy. Let's see what happens here. Right here, I get all of these errors where it actually doesn't connect properly to the server. So there is something I'm doing wrong as someone who's trying to integrate a server into this client, where it's just like, hey, just so you know, I can't speak to your Notion MCP. So in terms of setting up these clients, it's amazing when they work. There's over 8,000 MCPs that exist right now. It's also hard to get them started, because if they don't work, you are stuck debugging them. So in terms of where gumloop comes in, for those who don't know, gumloop is a visual no-code automation software. Think of it like virtual Lego blocks for any workflow you've got. Gumloop has integrations that both have MCP servers baked in. So I'll show an example of like how that MCP server is baked in. And then also there's a new feature where you can make custom nodes just in natural language using this benefit of having a standardized connection MCP. So you can describe different examples, like this is the calendar node. You can give it different examples like give me meetings in the last 24 hours, create new meetings, etc. And using natural language will actually make a node in gumloop. So we'll get this cooking because it takes a little while. So as you can see, all I did was use one of the prompts that existed and I said, hey, help code this up for me. So this is live in gumloop right now, where we're cooking up one of the MCP nodes where it's building out custom parameters. You can see like here, we can choose between different calendars. We've got the time period, which is a drop-down right now for range. You can change these guys, and let's just keep it as is, generate code. So in terms of the new term vibe coding, what we're doing is we're just letting Gummy do the work for us. So we're going to let this bake for a little bit. And so in terms of MCP and why it's interesting and why it's important is we start getting into more assistant and agentic level workflows versus having to hard code everything ourselves in gumloop. So one example from a CEO perspective, I'm constantly doing weekly reviews of like, how is my week structured? How am I spending my time? And is there different things I could be doing to spend my time better or differently for future weeks? So without gumloop MCP, what that looks like is it pull in a calendar reader node. It's doing exactly what it sounds like. It is reading my calendar for the last month. In terms of feeding that forward in a gumloop, it's just combining the text so I can analyze that in one prompt. So I'm just combining each name of the calendar event with the start time and description, and then combining that into one example or one text list. And then from there, I have a prompt right now using Claude 4 Sonnet, just asking, hey, based off of this calendar, this is a CEO calendar, please bucket the meetings into different categories and give recommendation to where the focus is. And then here's a structured output. So if we run this guy in gumloop, again, this is pretty simple. We're grabbing calendar events, we're flattening that list, and then we're asking AI to like give us a structured report to see, based off of this 30-day reflection, where and how was time spent. So this is for those who are new into gumloop. Gumloop is a drag and drop, connect the dots kind of workflow where you can do a bunch of different things, and workflows like this work well. So let's see. So we've got, based off of looking at the calendar, you've got 45% of your time in business operation and growth. You've got a lot of one-on-ones with team members, clients, checks out. Spending time doing community events. Yep, that checks out just like this. Got 20% on wellness and some tips to improve. Nice. So in terms of the last 30 days, this is helpful just in terms of getting like a calendar assistant view of what this looks like. And when starting thinking about from an MCP perspective, the interesting thing is the Ask AI node in gumloop, which is just a single call to a large language model, actually has the ability to talk to different MCP servers. So you can think of in this workflow, I had to connect the calendar read data to the system prompt here, and I had to tell it exactly where the calendar data is and what to do with it. And so in this example, where we're using MCP integrated into the AI node, part of an MCP server is an LLM actually figuring out what to use it for and like what to do. So I kept the same prompt so we can see the difference, but if we zoom out in gumloop, this is now just one node. This is just using Ask AI to look at my calendar. And in terms of setting up an MCP server, it's as easy as 3 clicks. In the back end of gumloop, you just say, hey, here's my calendar, get me a URL, and let's make it work. So I set that up before here, and let's see how this runs. So again, this is one node, and let's actually just change the prompt so it removes the cache, and we'll run. So the benefit of MCP is now instead of having to connect a bunch of different tools and data sources, now just in this Ask AI node, it's baked in where it's reading the calendar. We can rename that too, so we've got visuals there. I'm gonna pull up the chat as this guy's cooking. Does gumloop support new auth? Nice, Aaron's in the chat already. Got auth taken care of. Nice, we got enterprise support. Nice, and one of the questions I asked in gumloop, coming in tomorrow, you guys are getting hot news. One of the questions I had was, one of the benefits of having an MCP server baked in here is you can have different MCPs and tools. So if you wanted to do something like read my calendar and also check Jira tickets, check my GitHub, or read through Google Drive, any MCP server you want, the ideal use for MCPs is be able to have almost like a Swiss Army knife where you have multiple servers connected into one, and you now have an orchestration node. So that sounds like that's coming tomorrow. Sounds like we're one day too early for this session, which we'll have to do another one. So that's an exciting update in the chat. So now if we just look over here at the current run on the right side for the output, remember this is an AI node thinking about what to do with calendar data, and all we did was add in calendar as an MCP server here. And in terms of the output, we got the last 30 days. We're getting a similar kind of output without having to manually process, load, and understand the data. So it's like, hey, you're spending 42% of your time in business operations, checks out. 35% of the time in admin and wellness. Okay. Technical work. Yep. Recommendation for better focus, consolidate meetings. Nice. And then it breaks it down by day part, just so we've got what that looks like. So again, in terms of summarizing, being able to use different MCP servers, this helps you also move even quicker than the gumloop team is constantly shipping new nodes and new capabilities. Anything that has an MCP server, you can add to gumloop and use that in a node. So that is one example of using MCP where it's baked right in. Let's go back to this guy. So we've got a node where we're using MCP capabilities to program a custom node ourselves. So remember, we just said, hey, we want to grab all the meetings from the last 24 hours with more than 2 attendees. And the reason that this is important in gumloop is there are certain functionalities with the Google API, unless it's hard-coded into the gumloop node, you might not be able to use that in a gumloop workflow. So one example is the filtering for attendees. That's a functionality that if you were hard-coding this, you could use this in an agentic workflow or an automation workflow. In gumloop, being able to build out a custom node with MCP enables that function use too. So again, we started in natural language. We had the initial draft for the node. And if we're truly vibe coding, we're letting the Gummy copilot lead us. It just says, hey, you're ready to be tested. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the Gummy, new Gummy assistant with MCP. You don't have to run your own tests and evals. It'll actually test it for you. So it's like, hey, I just tested the node, it works. And that's awesome, because if it breaks, it'll also say, hey, it doesn't work, do you want me to fix it? So the feedback loop is a closed loop within Gummy. And if you're curious, you're like, what did you even do, Gummy? Like, what does this look like? You can also read and edit the code on the right side too, where it's very well annotated and documented. So we've got, hey, we've got these parameters coming in, parsing the date. We've got different if-else statements. So I think one question people have is like, why would I use an MCP node in my gumloop when I could just kind of filter or do things without that? I find myself personally in different automations where if it's an if-else condition or if it's a filter, you no longer need that externally, and that's now baked into the node. So you've got some logic that's baked into these nodes, which can be used in future nodes. And so that's the code set. Cool. So let's save this as is. And so once it saves, this is now a node that can be used across any workflow in gumloop. So just like you build custom subflows and you have access to them in your library, we now have this node which we can use pull in calendar. We've got the different times, so we can do let's do for tomorrow. So we've got for the next 2 days, pull out my calendar information. And this is where it becomes really interesting, because in terms of that filter, you could filter by people's emails. So you could do internal, external filter. If you've got meetings with your team all day and you just want to focus on that, you could filter by people. You could filter by people's emails. You also can filter by number of attendees. So if you know, like, hey, anything that's a one-on-one, you can say, hey, let's make sure we just have one. So we've got that here. Let's just run this node, make sure it works. I see your comment, Deep. It is like, hey, code gumloop new. In terms of slower, all of this is recorded, so don't worry. You'll be able to rewatch this. Main goal is to be able to have enough information that's worth rewatching. And happy to answer in the discussion anything we covered a little bit too quickly and that you want feedback on. So we can see with this new node that we made in gumloop, it's now pulling in all the information. And I could then feed this forward into, so if I'm like, hey, I don't want to read through that information. Let's do the same thing we did in the last one. We use an Ask AI node to summarize it. And we'll connect this here. So you are a helpful calendar assistant. And as you have different information in an automation, whether it's calendar info, Gmail info, Jira tickets, or GitHub, you can start using that information in different ways to either report out or do different things with. So for this one, it's like, hey, suggest prep for each meeting. So now it's not only giving me agenda, it's going to take from this node. Oh, and this is super nice. So now I do this all the time. I connect the node super quickly, and I always forget to connect. This is a super nice reminder. If you ever get stuck in gumloop, gumloop has good visual error messages. It's like, hey, we actually need the meeting list. And because it's coming in as a list, we're just going to have to join. We just have to flatten a list. A list just means it's a set of information set up as a list. And so we take this list, combine it as a comma. Now we've got it as a flat set of text. Here's the calendar info. All right, let's save that. Let's exit that and let's run it. So now we're using the custom node custom Google Calendar node that we baked with MCP. We're joining the text and we're just asking AI, give us a quick bullet point list of what's ahead. And let's see if it got it right. This is happening right now. Spot on. That's happening tonight. Checks out. Cool. And then in terms of prep suggestions, this is also interesting, right? So it's like, hey, before you host the no code demo today, make sure you prepare the integration and test all tech beforehand. That's helpful. This is a virtual stream. Same thing, we've got a demo session tonight, and then also different suggestions for different meetings. So that's an example of how to use gumloop, a node within the workflow. And the one thing I'll say is the gumloop team has great documentation. If you're just like, hey, this quick intro has piqued my curiosity, and I want to learn more about like MCPs, there's a really good guide from Gumloop just talking about what is Model Context Protocol. So if you want to go through that, that's here. In terms of, there's also an open standard for being able to use GumCP as a client, where you've got all these different connections too. So as the team is internally shipping out new nodes or different things, these are all integrations that you can launch as your own server, even if it's not yet in the library. And then lastly, in terms of Gumloop, if we go back to the Canvas editor, shout out to the team for this new UX. It's so clean. In terms of different integrations, right now, the nodes that can bake themselves, we've got Slack, we've got Gmail. So anything with an MCP tag right here has the ability to program that kind of node in natural language. So we've got Gmail, Sheets, Calendar, GitHub, Reddit, Salesforce, HubSpot, and Jira. So the team is actively shipping week by week. This was an announcement that just came out last week. All of those nodes, just like we did with the calendar node, you can design a custom one. So that is a quick 15, 20-minute crash course on MCP and MCP use in Gumloop. Let's jump into questions. Feel free to add more questions in the chat as they go through. And then, yeah, go right now. And even if you have ideas or just general questions too, we got Aaron on the call here, which is such a treat. Feel free to ask away. He knows more than me on the Gumloop side. I build with Gumloop. He's at Gumloop. In terms of Deep's question, what are the main uses for Gumloop? Not devs, I guess. I think one thing when thinking about Gumloop, it's really good as an automation platform. And from an automation platform perspective, when you have a team, when you have different kinds of teams in different departments, you can start using Gumloop to do visual automations that other team members can monitor, observe, and edit. So I see Gumloop, what I've seen Gumloop used for really well in clients that we've worked with and built custom workflows for. Not everyone on the team is going to be a developer or wants to jump into the command line, but everyone on the team can jump into a visual canvas like Gumloop. So it's a really good way to hand off different automations. So that's one way to use Gumloop across non-dev teams. Yep, you also, with the GumCP, you can also connect to Claude, so that also works. Deep asks, what are some of the most exciting use cases you're seeing with customers inside of Gumloop? Aaron, do you have an answer for that? Is there an example you've seen in the last week or two since you guys have released the protocol? Yep, take your time. Aaron is loading in the mic. As Aaron's loading in the mic,
Can you hear me now?
the anticipation is real.
Yeah,
You'd be surprised.
yeah.
We're ready for the surprise. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
you
hear
guys, yeah, cool. No, so it's two things, right? One, so it's like create a Slack channel is one of those things we didn't support, and we now support through MCP, right? So what that means is like even simple endpoints are now available, and the breadth of things you can do in Gumloop is much larger. But then when you think of things like Salesforce, right, like or HubSpot, yeah, you can like retrieve ticket, but that's not usually what people want to do. They'll be like, hey, look at my calendar today. And then each time you identify an external attendee, go to Salesforce and give me all tickets that were associated with that person, or give me the last 3 QBRs. And then in the next node, like summarize them and give me a one pager, right? So it's both like a deeper integrations, right? So we can do more with existing integrations. And we can do more complex steps, right? Which weren't possible before, either because we didn't support the actions or because the like what people want to do is a little too complex. So we're seeing like really, really cool use cases around HubSpot, GitHub, Salesforce. In personally, I kind of feel like just like some magic where it can be like, hey, give me all tickets that were assessed today and that were assigned to and break them out assigned by who owns those tickets, right? Um,
Yeah, I think when you start letting the MCPs start editing different parts, whether it's editing a Salesforce or HubSpot CRM, whether it's creating a Slack channel, even adding the Slack canvas, I think that's an underutilized part of Slack. But if most people aren't using it, how nice is it that now you have an automation or assistant workflows? Let's say you're adding a new team member onto Slack and you don't want to just export them to like your Notion or your Jira. They can start having an onboarding experience through a gumloop automation, and you can start creating a custom canvas for them to go through. So being able to add and edit different within different integrations, I think it's super interesting, and I think it changes gumloop from the automation category. Now it starts to put into the agentic category, which previously you could have done before with either more complex gumloops or custom nodes, and so it's cool to see that baked
yeah.
in.
What I will say on that, just a note, like I hesitate to use the word agentic, right?
Mm.
Not because I think you're wrong. It's more that agentic often means like human in the loop, surprisingly, right? Like, hey, go look at my Salesforce leads. They're gonna be like, here they are. Like, but that's not like saying what formatting you want it, when do you want it, what details do you want to retrieve, right? So sometimes like agentic almost means more work, right? So we have this like chat-based interaction that we expect. Like actually Gumloop is more of like, oh, actually I have this like very clear workflow that I want to execute sequentially. So yes, there's some agentic parts to this, right? Like writing the node, getting the information. But I would think of Gumloop more as a kind of workflow automation tool. And
So once you have that, you'll be able to
primarily because agentic today just means a lot of work. Surprisingly, like, oh, go read my Slack messages. They're like, which ones do you want me to read?
Okay. So
And then it's like too much information or too little information. So we're actually more of like,
uh,
hey, I have this workflow. It has AI in it. I want to automate it. Sorry for the background noise.
Totally okay. Yeah, it makes sense in terms of the automation side, where once you set it, everything you set in Gumloop runs as expected, which is super helpful. So to your point, your next question, Deepa, like, hey, I've got all these DMs in Slack or in Notion. Like, how do I go between them? I find that Gumloop is really good at being more omni-channel. So, for example, every time you message yourself a note in Notion, you could have it save, or sorry, every time you DM yourself in Slack, you could have that save in Notion, you could have that save in a Google Drive doc, and you could start searching, querying that elsewhere too. So that's one way, definitely one use case is being able to make sure that one thing that is in one place starts being posted and saved across other places too. A question I'll throw at Aaron for deep. Can LangGraph be integrated with Gumloop?
well, have you been?
No idea, honestly. I don't know what LangGraph is. So maybe that speaks to my ignorance deep.
Totally okay. LangGraph. So LangGraph, it's a development framework where you're able to create agents and different workflows in the command line. And
Oh,
let's
got
see.
it. Oh, okay, yeah. So I think the big distinction is that, yeah, again, like Gumloop is not an agent platform, right? So think of Gumloop more as like a workflow automation, right? So like you can have an agent that says, hey, do some research about attendees in my Google Calendar. And then it's going to do things that you may agree with, you may like, you may not like, right? And then it's like you have to do it every day, right? Whereas Gumloop is like, no, actually, I want a one-page report that has summaries coming from Salesforce, coming from HubSpot, that uses Perplexity, and I want to deploy that for every salesperson in my company, right? Like that's more of that Gumloop type workflow. I'm not saying that your workflows can't be brought in, but they will be much more deterministic. And so there are agentic type things on Gumloop, but our workflows are deterministic. You have inputs and you have outputs, and AI steps in the middle.
Yep, and I think just looking at some of the LangGraph documentation, I just shared the Perplexity search for Deep's question. You can start using Gumloop both as an entry point or an endpoint with API connections. So if you have something coming out of LangGraph, you could send it into a gumloop automation. And if you have something coming out of a gumloop, you could send that back to LangGraph. So just like you would do different handoffs in LangGraph between your assistants or your agents, you can use gumloop in between there. Again, if your like sales, marketing, customer support team is using, your operations team is using gumloop, you can start going between the two just like you would any other handoff. And then Deep has a question around triggers. Yep, so I'll share screen here. You can trigger or awake a gumloop in a bunch of different ways. So let's just show what triggers exist. So just like you would schedule a custom ChatGPT workflow, there's a new time trigger in gumloop. So you can say like every day at 9 a.m. run this, or once a week on Fridays run it here. You can also use different triggers too with different just different monitoring. So if like you add a new file to a Google folder, if you're reading a sheet or database, if you're reading when an email comes in, a Notion update comes in, a Slack comes in, there's different triggers that are baked in here. You can also make custom nodes or add in webhooks too. So if you wanted to make your own trigger, that's also possible within gumloop. I know we're at time. If people have to hop, feel free to hop. If you got a few more questions, we'll stay on a little bit longer. Feel free to share questions in the chat or, yeah. Appreciate y'all joining. For Deep, could you export these workflows and share an email with a recording? Yeah, so everything right here is recorded. I'll share that. And then feel free, any of the workflows I just shared, happy to publish the workbook. Cool thing about gumloop, you can share them just like you would share a Google Doc. So feel free to just reply back, hey, I want access to them. I'll share the links there. Usually we'll put them in the YouTube description. Bye. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for joining.
All right, yeah, thank you. Thank you for hosting. Great session. And if anyone has questions or stuff, I'm here, I'm available. Have a good one, y'all.
Thanks, Aaron. Take care.
Bye.
Conditional logic just for that.
Deep, for your question of what's next, more custom MCP nodes. So gumloop just released their first 7 last week. So there are going to be more nodes that come through the pipeline. And then also what we're talking about, multi-tool orchestration. That's one feature that's coming up soon, because in the Ask AI node, you can only do one MCP server at a time. So those are two areas on the roadmap where gumloop will be growing. Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? Happy to stay on for a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions coming in. You're welcome. Take care. Bye, Deep.